This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by Isotope, Atom Audio, Native Instruments, Lewitt, Spectra 1964, and OWC. You're hearing my voice right now on the Lewitt Pure Tube microphone through the Spectra 1964 STX 100D mic pre and C610 complementer mixed with Isotope RX, Ozone, Neutron, and Nectar, all recorded safely onto an OWC SSD and mixed on Atom Audio monitors. Please check out our awesome sponsors using the link in the show notes. It's a great way for you to help support this show. Now get ready to rock.
I did that movie Oracle that hasn't come out yet. For the first 2.5, 3 months of working on that, I wasn't writing cues. I was just coming up with sounds that were different and working on the programming and sound design of the music itself because I wanted to create a template that was unique to this project only. So I recorded a lot of sounds and then sent all that to a synth programmer who then kind of warped the sounds.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. Hey Rockstars, have you checked out Native Instruments recently? Look, no matter what style of music you make, Native Instruments gives your studio everything you need, from drums, loops, and beats to the coolest synths, realistic strings, guitar amps, and futuristic synth pads. I personally love recording and tracking real bands in my studio, but then also adding awesome overdubs from Battery, Contact, Massive X, Super 8, Guitar Rig, and Hybrid Keys, for example. Go pick up Complete Start for free today with a bundle of 2,000 sounds and 6 gigs of samples over at nativeinstruments.com and use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off. Some restrictions apply. Atom Audio can provide all your monitor needs, whether you're setting up a first-time home studio for recording music or podcasts, or a world-class full-size studio for professional mixing and mastering in stereo or immersive sound. Featuring the XART tweeter and custom DSP onboard processing, the A-series monitors will perfectly adapt to your studio. Get the Atom Audio monitors and subwoofers that are right for you with an extended 5-year warranty at atomaudio.com. Howdy, Rockstars. It's your host, Lid Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, the podcast bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Jermaine Stegall, a film composer and conductor with over 50 projects to his credit. Jermaine's most well known for the score of Coming to America, the highly anticipated sequel to the Eddie Murphy classic. Jermaine recently completed the score for Praise This for Universal Pictures. Other scoring and conducting assignments have included Senior Year in 2022 for Paramount Pictures and the upcoming film Oracle for Universal. As a musical conductor, Jermaine led a live string orchestra alongside Grammy-winning artist Tori Kelly at the televised 2019 ESPY Awards. A year before that, he conducted the orchestra to Camila Cabello's performance of Consequences on ABC's American Music Awards. In addition to scoring 2 seasons of Our Star Wars Stories, an original digital series from Lucasfilm and StarWars.com, Jermaine was also nominated for a MPSE Golden Reel Award for scoring the animated Netflix short film Canvas, directed by Pixar's Frank Abney III. Not listed here, but one of the credits in Jermaine's playlist, which we have a link to in the show notes, is also the film Proximity, which he scored the music for, which was very cool to listen to. So a big shout out and a thank you to our mutual friend, Chris James, for making our introduction. Thanks, Chris.
James.
Please welcome Jermaine Stegall to Recording Studio Rockstars. Jermaine, are you ready to rock, dude?
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm ready.
Dude, it's great to have you here.
It's happening.
And of course, we met when I was over visiting Chris and checking out all his Atmos mixes there and everything.
Oh, yeah.
And he was like,
I
dude,
was just talking about him.
He's awesome. He's awesome. We stay in touch all the time. We were in bands together back at MTSU in Murfreesboro. And I always love to go visit when I'm out there. But, Chris was like, dude, you need to have Jermaine on the podcast. So then, I reached out to you. But what's cool is as I sort of got your bio and started listening to your music, I realized that you're like, you've got this whole world that's fascinating to me of composing and conducting and doing what you do. So very excited to have you here. Please give us a little bit of an introduction in your own words. Like how'd you get interested in music to being at the point where you're composing for major films?
Yeah, I was just talking to someone about the fact that, when I was leaving high school, which was 1995, after my senior year, about to enter undergrad as a saxophone performance major, I, obviously grew up watching tons of movies all the time, like tons. We would go to the theater sometimes 2 or 3 times in a weekend, and maybe also the drive-in and see a double feature.
Nice. Where was
we were seeing movies that was in Illinois.
Oh, cool.
So Joliet, Illinois is where I grew up, and a child of the 80s. I was born in 77, so we saw, a lot of classic movies that are staples now, that were out, back then. And it's funny, when I think of the drive-in theater, I literally think of movies like Conan the Barbarian, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Nightmare on Elm Street Part 1, Time Bandits. These are the kinds of movies that I was seeing at the drive-in. Yeah, at the drive-in. So it was just an interesting thing. It was also kind of complemented, cable television kind of coming into being a thing. And my older brother, who didn't live with us, my half brother, he used to go to his home where he had cable, and he would record movies on VHS and bring them back over. He would give me the cable guide, and he would say, circle any movies I want. And he would go and record whole libraries of movies. And I built up a library of movies that I used to watch over and over and over. And of course, there was recording movies off of TV back when you can record, movies off of TV. It sounds kind of funny and archaic. It's similar to TiVoing, but movies like Star Wars, The Goonies, whatever these movies would come on, I would just record all the classics and have them as a library. But that summer of 95, as I go back to that, when I saw the movie Apollo 13, that's the moment that I knew that I realized someone was doing film scoring on purpose. All of a sudden, like it wasn't just there, as I think I assumed as a child, even though I liked and kind of recognized the music from the backgrounds of films, I discovered that it was on purpose because of how well that movie was, the music synchronized to picture. And so that began the journey of trying to figure out how to be a musician, but how to complement the movie love and passion that I had growing up from childhood. So fast forward years later, I went to the University of North Texas to get a master's in music composition and applied a year early to what they have at USC. It's called a scoring at the time, Scoring for Motion Pictures and Television program was the name of it. It's now accredited degree, master's program, where I think you actually get a degree. Back then, it was a 1-year certificate. So it was pretty renowned. Composers that I, admired, a lot of them had gone through that program. I was set on this guy, Marco Beltrami, who had gone through the program in 94. And in 96, the movie Scream came out. So it became this thing of, if you go there, maybe I can be doing a big movie in 2 years. I got to meet this guy and, discover what the secret it was. But, as you ask, fast forwarding the end of my 1 year, I ended up becoming his first intern, which is kind of this fun Cinderella story on the movie iRobot, which was kind of the beginning of getting out of school and being watching a movie, an actual score be recorded And in that case, it was a replacement score. So he only had 10 days, and I think he had to write 100 minutes of music. So to go to his studio as an intern and see these mock-ups, they have to do mock-ups. When we're presenting our music to the studio and a director describing what the recording might sound like, to hear those mock-ups early on, meeting orchestrators, meeting copyists, that was the beginning of meeting a lot more people in the industry and kind of separating myself from the idea of being in a program, so to speak, and a student. Because, like I said, I've gone from 5-year undergrad degree, 3-year graduate master's degree, 1-year advanced studies certificate. That's 9 years of being in college. And now the idea of segueing into the real world, no more school ever. It was a nice, slow, gradual introduction over the course of a couple of weeks of watching that happen.
That's pretty wild. So when you were, that
was 2004.
Yeah. And when you were in high school, you were playing a lot of saxophone. That was basically your instrument. And did you feel pretty serious about it as a musician at that point?
Yeah, already? I thought at that point that I was going to be a solo saxophonist recording saxophone solos in the midst of pop songs, like maybe a Dave Koz or Dave Sanborn, and maybe have some smooth jazz albums out on the side, but be the guy that gets called to do a saxophone song, a solo on the bridge. That was what I thought was going to be the whole thing.
A lot of solos to start with.
Yeah, that would be the intro to the solo, and then 15 seconds later, I'm out.
That's great. And so having the education as a horn player, did that give you all the compositional knowledge that you needed to sort of really have the foundation for understanding writing music and arranging and all that kind of stuff?
Good question. I would say that, in conjunction with that, people always ask me if I could ever do anything different, what would I do? And I used to say play piano, but I feel like playing saxophone really informed the sense of being melodic, and the care and the desire to be melodic as something in the forefront that I still care about. Like, even though film scoring is a lot more than just melodies. It's like way more, especially now. Like a lot of the times it's musical sound design. A lot of the times is what is expected. And I don't know if you've heard the term hybrid scores. That's a thing where you are combining lots of synthesizers with live elements.
Yeah.
Chris James and I used to always talk about Thriller as being the best half synth, half live album of all time. That's my little Chris James shout out moment. If he's listening, I wonder what he would say now. But anyway,
what do you think, Chris?
Saxophone, that was a big part of me caring about melodies so much. I
don't remember which piece it was. I think it was in Proximity. I have to admit, I got a little bit sucked into Proximity.
Oh, good.
Prepping for this interview. In fact,
we should talk more about that score.
Yeah, I'd love to. But just to say that, like, talk about having the best homework ever that you could do for a possible best job. I just rented the movie and just sat and just watched the movie.
Oh, interesting.
So it's very cool. But there was
can I just go back for a second? Because that came out at the very beginning of the pandemic. And I felt like when everything shut down, it's like, okay, if you didn't work on anything, the idea of having something new coming out wasn't going to be a thing. But we rented that movie, and I don't know, I'm just having a little memory here of when the theaters were shut down. One of the theaters close to us said that they would sell popcorn at least to try to keep the lights on. So we went and bought 2 giant bags that are 3 feet long, 2 bags of that, because we had this movie Proximity that we're going to have to stream at home. And my kids apparently were deathly afraid of the movie. I just had to throw that out because it's not even that scary, but it was going to be a whole popcorn thing. And I remember the whole nostalgia, and they didn't want to watch it at all.
Wow. That's such a trip. Okay, so this is something I think everybody listening, the rock stars, I always refer to our audience as the rock stars, so can probably relate to, is parenting And that whole like push and pull between making music and loving doing it, and then your kids like sort of liking some of what we do as parents, and then other things not liking it. But I never in a million years would have predicted that as a film composer, your kids wouldn't automatically like every movie that you ever work on.
Well, they thought it's borderline too scary, borderline for them. That was 23 years ago. So
your score's got some. I mean, it was funny because I listened to your score of that. And again, Rockstars, just scroll down after this and there's a playlist. You can just hit the link and go listen to some of this music. But listening to it, I was immediately sucked in just by the score. I was like, oh man, I can picture scenes going on and everything. And then I went and watched the movie too. But it's the score itself evokes a ton of emotion and, put me on the edge of my seat a little bit.
That's great. I have to, add a little bit of that to the proximity talk. I mean, if you want to get into that now, which was that, for me, that was a very, very unique situation, a very special score. And some of the things that made it special are that the director of that film, first of all, it's an indie film. So when the director really doesn't have anyone looking over his shoulders, he does whatever he wants. And in some cases, he would allow the composer to do whatever they want. In a studio situation, you tend to be trying to check more boxes and get things fulfilled that are working better for a broader audience as opposed to what you want or what the director wants. And in a lot of the cases of making that movie, the aesthetics that I had were the exact same as the director's. So, I was able to do a lot of things that I wouldn't normally either have the time or no one would care if I did them. Like we experimented a lot with tuba before we went into recording. And I should send you, there's a little, it's a note. You can probably note it a little behind the scenes on the making of on my YouTube page, at least, where I went to a tuba player's home. This is before the pandemic. And we recorded a bunch of tuba experimental sounds that I later manipulated. Then we went up to Skywalker Sound and had a brass session where we recorded live brass, and we had 3 tubas on the session. So the whole idea was very alien-esque spaceship sci-fi movie. I thought, why don't we make a meal out of the tuba?
Yeah,
it's not necessarily a.
I was going to say it's like Spinal Tap. Big Bottom, but for tuba.
Yeah, exactly. But you gotta do it somewhere. And it wasn't exactly like a Close Encounters reference, but it was more of, it kind of does fit in that, let's do something. I mean, this guy, he had all these ideas about pouring water in the valves and gargling and the sound and doing these things that I used, made samples. So some of those things you might notice when you're watching the movie, you might hear them when you listen to the music later. But again, like he allowed me to create these themes and melodies that we were able to use throughout the movie, which a lot of the times it's not, unless the director really wants all that, you're not asked to do it and you're not required or expected, or it might be too much, with today's filmmaking.
Howdy, rock stars. I've got a secret to tell you about how I get a consistent sound mixing over 1,000 hours of recording studio rock stars. My secret is using iZotope, RX, Ozone, Neutron, and Nectar to make this podcast sound great. Right now, you're hearing RX breath control, declick, declip, DS, deplosive, voice denoise, Ozone multiband compression, Neutron EQ, and limiting, all from iZotope. Go to iZotope.com and use the secret code ROCK10 to get 10% off. My studio is proudly powered by OWC, and I love how it's improved my workflow. OWC can connect all your audio work drives, trackballs, mix controllers, MIDI keyboards, audio interfaces, displays, or cameras so that you can work fast and focus on making your best record ever. Go look at the Mini Stack STX, Thunder Bay 4, or Gemini Thunderbolt 3 dock at macsales.com/rockstars to find the perfect solution for your studio from OWC. And thanks for using our custom link in the show notes. Yeah, so a couple of thoughts. One is, again, I don't remember which track it was, but there was one where I distinctly heard, it must have been a tuba, it was down low, and then it sounded like it was like warped and pitched down even lower.
There was one where he did
hybrid scores.
Like he was making this really weird. So I had him do like 3 or 4 times. And I said, every time you get to the top, I need you to hit a different note on the top.
Nice.
You know? So it's kind of like we started coming up with gestures also that it would be a gesture, like a sound for, there were these things called the androids in the movie, which are like half human, half robot or whatever, that were like, let's find some places for it.
No spoiler alerts.
Well, no spoiler, no, sorry. I want people to see this because you wouldn't watch that. That wouldn't be a movie that people would see. Everyone has Amazon Prime. People are going to see Coming to America, but Proximity, you're going to have to go search for that, you know?
And I did.
So I'm glad that
just a few bucks to rent it, so totally worth it.
I'm glad that,
and I'm not
glad
done
you
yet.
did that.
And I'm not done watching it too. So
good.
I get to watch the rest after this. Yeah, I was going to say, so the pitch down stuff was really cool. And there was a question that I wrote too, which maybe this is relevant. So I'll ask it now. Do you ever feel like there's a challenge in matching the composition to the film and what you see on the screen? Does it ever feel like a disconnect as a composer? And what are some of the ways that you bring that all back to focus and connect that? Or the opposite? Does it ever feel like it's like you're saying, like it just feels like, wow, you guys are just, on the same page about everything?
I feel like it just depends. Like right now I'm about to start another indie thing. And it's funny, like after, and I haven't done like a ton of studio movies, but like I could see why like a lot of the guys that are higher up, in the ranks doing studio movies all the time will look for indie stuff to do to take a break from that. But a lot of the times it is for that reason, so that you can have more of a freedom and a collaboration and just be more of an artist if writing music to picture is your thing, but those challenges do arrive sometimes when you're like, what do I do here? And, or what do I do that I haven't done? Because it's funny, you start off talking about proximity, which for me, it's like, it's actually very near and dear to me. Like even more backstory, like that filmmaker, how I got that gig is I was following him, the director, because he had made a short film I really liked. And I was like, I saw some images, some stills that he had drawn about this movie called Proximity that I was going to be doing. And I was like, I have to do this movie. And he described it. I was like, I have to do it. So I ripped these images from his website, put them a timeline in Final Cut, bounced the QuickTime, scored it, and sent it to him. And he ended up posting that clip on his website saying, if you act now, you'll get 3 tracks from our composer, which I guess meant that I was hired, which I thought was kind of funny. So you talk about that film like it was one of those things where, like, absolutely, like I can't say how many times I would do that whole thing over again. The way it went down, like we actually got to do the final mix of the film at Skywalker Sound. So we were there, up there, cool, living on Skywalker Ranch for a week, which he didn't think was possible. But I was like, it's totally possible. They said, if there are any cool projects, I'm like, this is a cool project. You should tell them about it. So, yeah.
Can we ask you about Skywalker? So I do have a short anecdote, which is at the very beginning of my musical career, where I switched from architecture to music, I was returning from 6 months in Hong Kong, of all places, and I spent a week in San Francisco, and I had decided I really wanted to study recording. And I went to some place in San Francisco. I've forgotten it now, but I got to go sit in on a class there. And the teacher was talking about Skywalker Sound and having been there or having worked there. And one of the stories that stuck with me was that when you would arrive there, it just looked like grassy fields because the paved driveway were these like octagonal bricks or something where the grass just goes right up through, so you don't see the road.
You know, if you think you're lost and in the wrong place, then you're there.
That's
pretty much. And the first time I went there, I'm like, am I being kidnapped? Which was in 2016. I was invited up there to do the Sundance had a composer and sound design lab there, and so they arrange for your flight and your transportation from the airport. I just get off the plane. I'm like, I don't know the address of this place. I just get in a car. We go. We arrive in San Francisco, and we're like in the car off on windy roads for like 45 minutes. And there's a moment where I haven't seen another human in a while.
Right. They're not like taking your cell phones and blindfolding you or anything, right?
Yeah, it was like, well, we were told no photos, no nothing. You're here, and that's it. Just be happy you're here.
That's cool.
But what a privilege to live there for 2 weeks, being creative,
So what's it like? I mean, if you were to describe it, I mean, we love this stuff, thrill us with the what the studio feels like when you're at a place like that.
Yeah, it was very incredible. Especially the first time. I mean, the first time there, number one, the only thing I could think was, how in the world do I get back here? Because it's not a thing that people just do all the time or are invited to go. It is kind of a more, I don't know what the word is, but is seemingly in the club type feel, even being there, because the property is owned by George Lucas. His office is still there. But each building, the way it's set up, is almost everything is like a mile from each other, or at least where you stay on the ranch. If you're staying there, is like 1 mile exactly to the work facilities. And each building, the way it's set up, you can't see any of the other buildings if you're in one of the buildings. So you have the main, what's called the tech building, where you do all the sound designers go to work. The mix stages are there. I can't remember how many there are. The scoring stage is there. Obviously, there's a cafeteria and so forth. But
these are probably huge spaces too, right? I mean, a scoring stage is massive.
Yeah, it's huge. It's beautiful, and I've done several score recordings there. As the movie Canvas that you mentioned, I actually did that while they were shooting Coming to America. I was flying back and forth to set. I thought you're talking about rock stars. This is what I absolutely thought I was I landed this Coming to America movie, and they're flying me to Atlanta to be on set. And then in between that, I was flying to Skywalker to go record this indie film Canvas just because I could, so to speak. Wow. So as you say, the rock star life, it was very private and very supportive environment, very creative. Like all the veterans, you got folks like Ben Burt, who, he created the sound of the lightsaber and Darth Vader's breathing. These are guys that still work there at the ranch, and they're walking around the halls, and you see them all the time. Gary Rydstrom, who designed the sound of our dinosaur from Jurassic Park and does all the Spielberg movies. Like, these are just people walking through the halls of the ranch.
I gotta share an anecdote there. So apologies to Gary, because I'm remembering you talked about going to drive-in movie theaters, and we do that in the summer too, up in Wisconsin. And the first time I saw Jurassic Park was in a drive-in theater.
Oh,
with a little speaker clipped on the window.
It sounded like,
well, it wasn't even so much that. It was just that everything was quiet. Like there was nothing happening in the movie, and there was an image of a puddle, and there were ripples in the water. And at that point, I realized, I was like, oh, that's the dinosaur foot, and I can't hear the bass because it's this little speaker on the car window.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the move. I just wasn't able to hear it the first time.
Yeah, absolutely. See, this stuff like that. It's funny, how all kinds of stuff we lost enjoying the drive-in. I mean, the drive-in thing is more about the vibe and the feel of it.
It's a great vibe.
I'm hoping that we can get there with our kids at some point. I think there are some in Southern California.
Yeah.
Somewhere. But yeah,
well, that's cool.
It's like I said, it's a very creative place and a safe space where people are just encouraged to come up there and try things. And that's the whole point of doing a film like that up there, whether it be the Canvas movie or Proximity or whatever. It's a place that, there's a lot of creativity involved and experimentation, and it's a lot of cutting edge artists walking around there all the time. People go there to the ranch to write, writers, all the time. Not just anyone, but like, I would say like friends of George Lucas type folks. Pixar is not too far from there. So it's a very quiet, peaceful, beautiful place with a lot of artistic aesthetics all woven throughout, and culture, books, movie posters, from throughout the history of cinema, pretty much line the entire grounds of the campus there. So, yeah.
That's wild. And were you having lunch with John Williams in the cafeteria? And
I didn't see him, but I did see Brad Bird there once in the cafeteria. Who's, I think he was either working on The Incredibles 2 or 3 or something. I just thought, there's Brad Bird just sitting there. Like, he's just sitting there. Like, no security. I'm thinking, you know what I mean? Like, these are the kind of, the nerds, like, these are our heroes, you like, you can't believe it. And, and anyone you talk to, they figure you must be a genius too if you're there,
That's wild. That's wild.
It's a really cool place.
Do you guys sneak up on each other during breaks and just like hum a little melody under your breath?
No, no one knows who I was up there.
That's great, man. Are you recording your own music or other people's music in your studio, but you're having trouble figuring out how to get your mixes to sound great? Do they sound kind of weak or distant or lack punch and clarity? Well, I've got a gift to help you take your mixes from sounding like basement demos to sounding much closer to professional mixes. And it's my free course called Mix Master Bundle. This course will show you how to get pro-sounding mixes from your home studio with free and stock plugins in Pro Tools, and the best part is that these mixing techniques work for you in any DAW, whether you're on Logic, Cubase, Studio One, Reaper, anything you can think of. If you're ready now to make your best record ever, then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now, and you can find the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. So the scoring stage, when I think about these big spaces, how big does a space need to be to have a scoring?
It depends. I would say, so when you think about scores, like where you're recording, sometimes the budget is the first thing that dictates where you're going to record. However,
sounds like a lot of records I do.
Yeah. So if budgets aren't an issue, then you definitely want to think of the kinds of scores that have been recorded at a certain place and why you want to, for instance, so Skywalker has a very, very high ceiling. It's probably similar to, I don't know if you ever went to Tadeo at the old CBS Radford lot where they had a giant high ceiling. There's a huge natural reverb. It feels like a giant hall before you even added any reverb. Sony is similar, high ceiling, a little bit more of a wide room that allows you also to, the way it's set up here, how, I guess, more of an intonation thing, how the ensemble's playing together in the room. Yep. It's good for that. Tadeo and Skywalker have that more high ceiling sound. It's more of a reverberant. It sounds massive. It sounds big. Yeah. So for me, recording brass there, part of it has to do with it's at Skywalker, and that's where we're mixing the movie anyway. So why not? Why not record there? And actually, the tuba player that we used, Peter Blake Cooper, who is a union tuba player here in town, he drove up to Skywalker 5 hours to play and be one of our 3 tuba players on the session that we recorded him before making these samples. And then he drove up because he's like, I never recorded at Skywalker. I'd like to go there. I'm like, do you want to drive? I don't know. It's up to you. And he was happy to do it. And then session was over, got back in his car.
Life of a musician, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Did you ever do the touring band thing? You must have done some of that.
No,
not at all.
I mean, no. In college, we did a little bit of, college tours with our top jazz band, but no, not the touring musician kind of type either. More the introspective, reclusive, artistic type. I mean, although some of those guys do tour as well, but no, didn't do that route. Yeah.
Well, that sounds really cool. Now on the other end of the scale or the spectrum, you know, you're not always in a huge orchestral space working with live musicians, right? You got to start somewhere with a sketch of an idea. So tell us a little bit about your own studio and what that's like. What is that process from, capture an idea to?
Yeah, I try to keep it scaled down, although the last couple of projects that have involved a little bit more synth stuff, even though I've hired folks to help program. When I said program, that word can sometimes be broad, meaning there are MIDI programmers that could take a piano sketch and make an orchestral mock-up. But when I say program, I mean add more of the bells and whistles in a studio that has more. Like last year, I got this mini Moog. You don't see it over here; it's off to the side. But a mini Moog to use in the score. Praise this. Just over here, and I have just the Nord stage that I used to use a little bit more with the live performances in church. And also, I love this. I think it has one of the best Rhodes sounds in it in terms of patches. But just have this Dofer MIDI controller as the main keyboard, and I use the old PV PC 1600 to write automation. While I'm sequencing.
That's got the faders on it and stuff, MIDI.
Yeah, it's got the faders for MIDI, so it's programmed. So the first fader is volume. Then you have modulation and expression and breath that I can also control. I also have it set up so that my audio from typically, and here's where we get a little bit nerdy.
Sure, we love nerdy.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to give it to you. So when I get picture, I ask for the editorial department to send me a version of picture that has their temp music. They always have temp music split to one side. So there's two mono pans. So hard right is the let's say music, temp music and songs, and then hard left is the dialogue and effects. And so I have both of those routed to two separate mono audio channels that I can then control with this MIDI fader and reference the temp quickly and or turn down the dialogue and turn it up, quickly with a fader, basically. And so and another nerdy thing is last year, Praise This movie is the first movie I've written in Cubase. I've been working in digital performer for 18 and a half years since I moved to Los Angeles. So setting all that up, I needed someone to actually help me make sense of how to get the workflow back to where it was, so that I can, like I said, reference the things I need to reference to get the film's score in and hear my MIDI score against the picture.
Right. It's like setting up your template, getting your routing sorted.
Yeah, actually, that kind of exactly.
Stuff. Did you find, a classic frustration for any of us trying to switch our DAW, our digital workstation, is like, how do you do this simple edit? I just want to move this from here to here. Did you have to go through all that kind of stuff?
At that point, it would be like he was kind of on call and available and happy to answer questions because I was making such a broad switch. And I, thankfully had time. Like when I started writing, nothing was due for a while. And I honestly didn't know that I was going to be successful to switch during a movie. But he kept telling me, like, you're literally not going to switch unless you have a project, where you find yourself in a situation you're never going to find yourself in when you're practicing on a DAW. You need to be in the situation where you need to then ask the question, I need to do this thing because I forgot that I needed to do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So thankfully, like I said, there was enough time. I think I got picture around September, and I started turning things in for them to hear probably 2 months later. And I was just kind of dabbling with ideas in the beginning, trying to figure it out. And again, it wasn't my plan to do it on a project, but it had been a long time that I kept tiptoeing with Cubase. And I'd had it since 2019. I just never was brave enough to write a piece of music in it.
You're absolutely right. I found myself often trying to learn some new software, and my desire to learn it's there, and because the nerd in me wants to figure it out,
Right.
But there were times where I could only really ever get something done if there was somebody breathing over my shoulder that said, "Can you make it do this?" And I was like, "All right." So under a little bit of pressure, and surprisingly, I found that sometimes if I had a couple of beers, it was easier than if I was.
Oh, really?
If I had a clear.
Then you're like, whatever. It's all jazz anyway.
Yeah, you're just like, yeah, whatever, and then you do it, and you're like, I don't know how I did it, but I won't remember it tomorrow.
Exactly. I made a ton of videos with it.
Yeah. Oh, really? Just for yourself about how you did
just
stuff?
Watching, he would make me, the guy that helped me, Giacomo, he would make me do it instead of just explaining it. And I'd have him record a video of myself going back through the menus to find out where I went when I did something. So
Giacomo's a cool name. Reminds me of the Wild Chapachulas.
Oh, I like that.
Dig it. All right. Well, so what are some things about Cubase that you ended up deciding you really like after you learned how to use it?
One thing that I definitely will say that I love a lot, often when scoring film, especially at, the studio level, they'll do these things called, testing or whatever, and picture will need to change based on a test screening. So, and even with while they're making it in the editing phase, picture's changing a lot. So conforming is something that we have to do to the new picture. And a lot of the times, more often than not, nowadays, the score is actually being written a lot of the times while they're shooting the movie. So they're as you're writing and as they're shooting, they're floating your stuff into a rough assembly of the movie. And, you're basically doing this for months until they've stopped shooting. And then the movie is what it is. It just gets shorter and shorter, but you're constantly conforming your cues. And one feature that it has that I really like is something called the glue tool, to where if you chop, you take a segment, chop it, and then smash those two things together. Before, maybe there was a way to do it before that I just didn't know, but there's a way now to where you can take it and use this glue tool and make two things that are now separate, one thing that sustains across the bar or whatever.
Oh,
I like that.
It sort of glues the MIDI together.
Yeah, it glues the MIDI. Also glue the audio, but not in a way where it's one file. It actually glues two files together and you can see where it separates. But with the MIDI, I like that it creates, like I can do a whole MIDI region or a whole group of MIDI regions and glue all of them together. And they're all kind of, you can slide the whole region around, or you can, the note values can tie over in ways that I feel like are faster when it comes to conforming. So honestly, part of me switching to Cubase was thinking about the movies that I know that people are doing where they have to conform a lot more than I have had to in the past. And the desire to be ready for that when it gets to me. Some of the movies I've been doing, there's some conforming to do, but extreme amounts of conforming in the future. Like just trying to get myself ready for that as a skill set, because that's really where you start to survive, the movies that people say that they want to do, but they don't know that there's more of a process that you need to have ingrained as a part of the process, not, I can't believe they're asking me to do this, and I had to do this. It's like, it's the process now. So I need to be prepared for some of those things before I get to them.
It's a get used to a factor. While we get interested in music by wanting to be a rebel, it turns out that learning how to be a good conformist is a good plan.
A collaborator is what you are, collaborator first, in my world.
Adam Audio introduces the all-new A-Series line of monitors, featuring the XART accelerated ribbon tweeter design, built-in DSP-based room correction, and speaker voicings to allow you to customize your Atom Audio monitors to your control room. The A-Series will rock in any studio. Small studio spaces or immersive multi-speaker configurations are perfect for the A4V or the new A7V, the next generation of the incredibly popular A7X. Mid-size rooms and narrow spaces will love the low profile of the A44H, expanding on the A7V sound, or the A77H, a true three-way midfield monitor delivering rich, spacious sound. And bigger studios will love the A8H, a three-way speaker and the pinnacle of the A-Series that delivers extremely accurate sound required for critical listening environments. Get the Atom Audio monitors and subwoofers that are right for your studio with an extended 5-year warranty at atomaudio.com. What do songwriters, music producers, DJs, EDM, TV, and film composers all have in common? They all need incredibly cool sounds that instantly transport the music to the style that they want. This is why Native Instruments is your ultimate toolkit with a massive library of sounds. Whether you want to create hip-hop, indie pop, classic rock, meditation music, pumping dance floor beats, or full orchestral arrangements, Native Instruments Complete Bundle offers you everything you need, from drums, loops, and beats to wild synths, ultra-realistic strings, and vintage electric bass, guitars, and keys. The list goes on and on. I personally love recording real bands in my studio and adding cool drum samples, synths, and futuristic keys from Battery, Contact, Massive X, Guitar Rig, and Hybrid keys, for example. Plus, it's super fun to create a string section for a rock band. Come on, go get Complete Start for free today with a bundle of 2,000 sounds and 6 gigs of samples over at nativeinstruments.com and use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off. Some restrictions apply. Hey, rock stars, we're back now for the jam session. My guest today is Jermaine Stegall, joining me from Los Angeles. You're in LA, right? Or you're a little bit maybe north of LA, is that right?
Yep. I mean, this studio is in North Hollywood, so
okay, cool.
It's all LA, right?
It's all LA. It's all LA. All right, you ready to jam?
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Let's talk a little bit more about some of your favorite instruments and tools for composing in the studio. So, you're using Cubase now all the time. You've learned ways that's good. You've also surrounded yourself with actual physical keyboards. Do you find that software synths are, a really good choice for the kind of stuff you do?
You know what's funny? That question, I feel like right now I'm in the middle of this process of trying, as I think about the kinds of movies I want to actually go for, scale down a lot of the actual manipulatory, synthy stuff that I used. I think it'll probably be cyclical too. Like I'll probably come back to it later. I've always wanted to own a mini Moog, by the way. So that finally happened. And now I got one, and I will definitely look for places to use it all the time. The Phantom I have over here was for a movie called Senior Year that I did, that I wanted to really do all the synth programming myself. But have another bag of tools. But in my orchestral template, like there's, you're talking about plugins and stuff, like I've gone crazy over the last couple of years as I've tried to expand certain things. And I feel like I don't enjoy going through a new library to look for the sounds that I like. Because after a few, I feel like I got all I need. In terms of new stuff, I don't even want to hear anymore. But typically, I haven't gone far enough. I would need to go through the whole library, honestly, and I wouldn't want anyone else to do it for me. I don't think I trust anyone to know exactly what I like. So, in my efforts right now in this next coming up season to pitch for projects that have less of that going on in it. I think I'm actually going to be scaling it down. Even the orchestral samples, I have a lot of orchestral sound effects that are gestures and things. I think I would rather get more back into being the person that's pitched to do live recordings and not so much, because there's a difference between writing for the synths and writing for a group, you know? And I think a lot of the times when you write for a group, the production will probably suffer, you know, because to do it right, like there are things that you might do, like you might have your woodwinds divided out to where all the clarinets, like you actually have more than one clarinet articulation patch. You might have 3 clarinet patches because it's going to be split up and you're going to be able to break it into, you know, something that an orchestrator will see later. And that's not going to sound as good to have 3 clarinet patches going that are MIDI, you know, even if you do the best mock-ups in the world. Like,
you mean, so let me see if I follow you on that. Yeah. So it's like, in order to have the correct articulation, you have to have a patch from this library and a patch from this one and a patch from this one.
A lot of the time,
they just sound like they don't go together.
Well, for me, I feel like the moment you have, like, there's one clarinet sample that's recorded very well, might sound really good, but like even with a synth woodwind, a flute, you know, clarinet, oboe, bassoon, contrabassoon, E-flat contra, you know, piccolo, when you add all those and they're all synth, I mean, even with the greatest samples in the world, the more synthesized the sounds are, because they're recordings of instruments, they're not the actual instrument playing. There's going to be something in there that gives it away to the purists, to you and I and the people that listen to this podcast. I want the music that I do to be enjoyed by everyone, even the people that don't know the difference, as well as the people that do know the difference. And the only way to achieve both is to have it recorded live. That's really the only way to get both. And it's not always about that, but that's the point of moving to Los Angeles and studying this stuff in school and doing it for 20 years, is that you can get to a point where you're actually doing it with live people, not programming every single line of this in one at a time to a degree where you're spending so many hours on just the programming. You're getting away from the art of composition, because there is an art, I think, to programming as well, you know, and that's why a lot of the composers, you know, if we end up talking about that, have to hire a lot of the times folks to help programming, just synth programming a score, because there's a production element to all this stuff in terms of, you know, what we're working on. The production needs to be at the level of the film, you know, that we're doing. So for one person to do 2 hours of program with all that detail, it's, it's tough, you know.
It's like playing every instrument.
When I say tough, I mean
orchestra.
Impossible.
Well, it's like you have to learn how to, you have to put in the time as if you played every single part of every instrument.
And that's way more time intensive than having a group play it, you know?
Yeah. And it's similar to doing that with the rock band in the studio, you know, like that, trying to go in and like program drums to do a whole thing that feels real.
Exactly.
Like just
or switching guitar articulations on a synth guitar patch, or going through Guitar Rig or some plugin that's got the amps or whatever. Like, if you have someone that's a session player that does this all day, you're going to tell them, I want it like this. And then you're going to do a take, as opposed to scrolling through menus, you know, looking for the thing that is going to get the sound that you think you want, you know?
Well, and I mean, you know, listening to your recordings is just, it's very striking, you know, I think when I was listening to Proximity, I was imagining, I was like, is this like really well done MIDI stuff happening, or is this real? It just sounded so real.
So that is an actual case of what I'm talking about. Like, first of all, I can only get away with that level of detailing in the orchestral writing if it's an indie film where the filmmaker isn't asking me to make a ton of changes. So the brass is all live, but everything else outside of the brass samples that we made and these synth samples, like the strings, that's all programmed strings, programmed percussion. If I was doing a studio movie like that, there would probably be picture changes to the point where you can't get the level of detail and sophistication that I wanted to achieve with an indie sci-fi movie that's a passion project. You know, I'd have to do things a little bit quicker and more efficiently and more in a more broad way that gets the job done and tells the story, as opposed to something that's satisfying some personal need where I'm trying to get it to actually sound like a live recording.
Yeah. And that particular one, the brass just sounds so graphic, you know.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. They're right. They're sitting right there. And we did, you know, a fun mix, and you know, Pat Sullivan mastered the CD. So it's like, I got everything that I could out of that project as far as being an indie thing. You know, it's like sometimes you get one thing, but you have to lose another, you know? So I might have to lose our ability to record live strings, but I did get the ability to have I mean, I was on that film for 2.5 years.
Wow.
So the programming, I would just keep coming back to it and tweaking it, you know, and asking myself, how can I make it better? And, you know, adjusting the modulation and the volume and the expression, you know, to get the vibratos just right, you know, on the string patches so that it actually sells more like a group is playing together, you know.
And that's one of the things that's nice about working with live musicians is also that we can't go back and change it, you know. So sometimes we just get it and we're like, that sounds great.
Get it done.
You know, and we leave it. But you know, sometimes when we can just keep changing it, we just keep going back.
That's exactly the curse of having extra time.
Yeah.
is you keep tweaking it.
So here's a question that comes in from none other than our brother, Chris James. And he said, I said, Chris, what should we ask Jermaine? He said, ask him how often does he, I think this is what he meant to say. How often does he lace his scores with himself playing winds? He's a great flutist.
Oh, good question.
Do you say flautist?
I don't say anything because I don't want anyone to know I have a flute. But because they're like, oh, really? Sure. Very seldom. I feel like the more whole tones and long notes and slow phrases I might be able to get away with, but the moment I have to do something that's moving, like it sounds like the player isn't experienced. So I did play saxophone on the movie senior year quite a bit. Actually, I laced, to his description, my score to praise this with that, but it was a request to take all that out. So I had this idea that, you know, because for me, growing up, you know, I mean, the movie is a gospel comedy musical, and I grew up playing saxophone in church. I didn't play keys when I was growing up. And so I always thought saxophone is what reminded me of gospel. So
the holiest of all instruments.
Yeah, it's supposed to be, right?
Right.
But it got axed.
Actually, it literally
pretty quickly,
isn't it?
Oh, really? Wow.
I just realized that.
No, it got axed.
It's got a lot of holes
quickly.
in it, right?
Oh yeah, well yeah. Of all the instruments that were on the score, yes, but yeah, it got axed. It didn't. My pitch didn't work out.
That's tough. Even as a film composer, you have to like grapple with the whole like let thing, you know.
It was a concept because I was like, I did a pass where I added saxophone to everything that I'd done, and so that the comment came back of take it out because overall it makes it sound like XYZ, you know.
Right.
I think the words were old fashioned, but I get, you know, saxophone's a bold choice, you know, you can't really hide it, you know, and it's comedy. It was a light comic score. It wasn't the hard hitting gospel thing that I thought it might be, but you know, even the script, it's a lighter approach in terms of the tone of the film. So
yeah.
I do see why saxophone had to go. I stopped trying clarinet a long time ago. So to his woodwind comment, no, saxophone and flute would be the only thing that I would try. But yeah,
there's a great saxophonist and flautist, Jeff Coffin, here in Nashville that I've recorded a number of times, but I don't know how or why those two instruments go together, but between Jeff and you, it seems like they do.
Right. Yeah, well, I like them a lot.
Yeah. So,
I love writing for flute.
What about wind controllers and things like that? Did you ever find that stuff useful in MIDI composition?
I thought about it. I tried it, but I didn't go very far with it. I don't know if you know anything about liquid instruments, or there's some instruments that were made. I forget the name of the company. Oh, sample modeling.
Okay.
There were some sample modeling instruments that were supposed to be pretty hand in hand with breath controllers and things. But I think I found that um, the modulation and stuff with those worked better than they did with other stuff. But the idea of sitting and playing with a breath control, like I just, I kind of gave up on it.
How about the Roly keyboard controller? Did you ever get into
I
that
haven't messed
stuff?
with that. I haven't messed with it yet. One day.
So, rock stars, if you're not familiar with what we're talking about, if you're going to do MIDI stuff, we all start with the MIDI keyboard that you just play the note, and there's the different notes, and then you got the pitch wheel and the modulation wheel. But if you really want to get deep, wind controllers give you the breath for controlling the MIDI, I guess MIDI volume, and then the Roly keyboard has like whole additional levels, right, where you can kind of wiggle your finger around and have all kinds of pressure control and things like that.
Yeah, yeah.
But
and,
I mean,
honestly, for people that play wind instruments, it's a natural way of mocking up a wind instrument and getting a way more musical, the expression and modulation, CC information will write in a different way, probably faster and more accurately than you could by moving a fader up and down.
Yeah.
And that's why.
Yeah.
So if any woodwind players that mock up your own stuff, I might recommend looking into that, because I know a lot of guys that have done it and have enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Because it feels more like them.
Yeah. I mean, I think everything that we can do to make the world of MIDI feel more naturally expressive, if you start out on a real instrument and that's how you come to it, I think that stuff helps. I guess I've dabbled a little bit in MIDI guitars, but never really to any extent that I felt like that was a solution for something. So you're using some software stuff, you're using hardware keyboards, you're like naturally deciding you want to simplify and get away from stuff. Maybe you'll come back to it. Are tools like Native Instruments Complete, are those like staples of composition?
I think they are, but I don't use them.
You don't?
I don't have Complete, but I have most of the orchestral samples. Whatever you might think of, I probably have it.
Yeah. Like Spitfire and East West.
Yeah, all that stuff. Yeah, the East West stuff, was really coming into popularity around 2003 and 2004. There was a gold, silver, and diamond edition back in the days of DVDs.
Yeah.
And I think I got as far as the gold. And there was a certain point where I think they really had the advanced, you could get there was an East West strings library that shipped on a hard drive that I ended up getting, but you needed to copy those samples to an actual faster hard drive, because it was, the technology and the streaming from those old 7,200 RPM hard drives. I think that was the speed. Yeah. It wasn't always, you couldn't load an entire string section on them back in the day. So, I mean, now solid state drives are the standard, so a lot of that went away. But there's so many different libraries now that, and again, with East West back in the day, you had to use their proprietary software to load the samples only in their player. I think it's called Play. So I actually use Vienna Ensemble Pro now. I don't know if you use that.
No, I don't. I'm not as, I'm not going to have all the orchestral stuff that you do.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I'm more of a dabbler, which probably a lot of our listeners are too, but it's fascinating to hear about it. And it's fascinating to hear for me to hear you talk about all these iterations of it, and just be reminded that, you've been doing this through the times where, they would talk about, like, I remember like Giga Sampler way back when.
I was going to say, Giga Studio was huge, and it was like, to be able to afford a computer that could load Giga Studio was like a whole thing. And, now I have a PC that was built custom, but back in the day, that would have been just one of several Giga Studios that you might have. You would probably need 2 or 3 at minimum to get the sound that where you have an entire library of sounds loaded, and a part of it had to do with the space of the hard drive and the speed of the computer. Like, you couldn't stream an entire mock-up from one computer, like, unless you're okay with it crashing and crackling during your playback or when you're bouncing.
Yeah. And what's funny to me and striking is just, you see the progression, the advancement of technology to the point where it's like, it's so much more effortless in a way. Like, there's so much more, computers are so much more capable of creating these big things. But yet at the same time, we get to the point where we're like, I kind of want to go back to real instruments, It's like,
I mean, I always wanted to, but like when you're wanting to write sweeping orchestral music, that's convincing. Because a lot of the guys back in the day, let's say 15 to 20 years ago, like someone like Danny Elfman, he might have 1 or 2 gig of studios because he knows he's going to replace the entire thing with an orchestra. So he doesn't want it to sound like this thing that's going to blow the producers away, because then he can't record an orchestra. So you want to keep it as minimal as possible when everything you do can or will be recorded live anyway. For me, I'm trying to get to a level back then where I want the producers to hear my music and go, oh, I understand what he's doing. Because if you don't have the technology, then it sounds like a small, cheap synth score that no one wants to hear or give an opportunity to go record live to maybe see if it'll sound better. Like,
so
no
in
one
other
wants
words,
to
you
do
have
that.
to strike, you have to hit that sweet spot in the middle. You
Exactly.
got to make it sound just good enough. But like they say about a gig is you always want to leave them wanting more, don't play too many encores.
You want them to leave them wanting more, but like when you have no name, like the music has to really, really jump out of the, the speakers. And to get it to do it with synths was way harder than it is now. Now it's more, I would say, all the samples are, out of the box. Like if you knew nothing about sample libraries right now, and you went on Spitfire's website or Cinesamples or East West, and you bought an entry level, all inclusive, just a quick start light version of a library and loaded the entire thing in your template, it would sound comparable to a live recording in a lot of cases. And that's with very limited knowledge of, programming and the mod wheel and all that shaping stuff. The samples, because it's recordings of live people playing, it's going to sound way better than it did 15, 20 years ago.
OWC is your one-stop shop for flexible drive storage and connectivity solutions for your studio. The Mini Stack STX for your Mac Mini adds 2 additional drives over a universal SATA HDD SSD bay and an NVMe M.2 PCIe SSD, plus 3 additional Thunderbolt USB ports. The OWC Thunder Bay 4 chassis, built like a tank, gives you 4 hot-swappable 2.5-inch RAID configurable drive bays, plus an extra Thunderbolt 3 jack for daisy chaining up to 5 devices. Or check out the OWC Gemini Thunderbolt 3 dock with 2 RAID configurable drives and 7 ports of connectivity, including a front-side SD card reader, 1 gig Ethernet, 2 USB 3.2 ports, a dedicated display port, and an additional backward-compatible Thunderbolt port. Get your studio connected with the Mini Stack STX, Thunder Bay 4, and Gemini Thunderbolt 3 dock at macsales.com/rockstars. Use the custom link in our show notes because it's a great way for you to help support this podcast. So thanks, Rockstars. I am totally blown away with Isotope Ozone, Rockstars. I've been mastering a lot of my records recently, and Ozone makes it so easy for me to get a fantastic sound. The Mastering Assistant will help you get started by measuring your track and suggesting all the settings you need to get a professionally targeted result based on the genre and EQ curve of your choice. You can even reference a specific song if you want, using simple yet sophisticated modules like Clarity, Impact, Low-End Focus, Stabilizer, Imager, Exciter, and Spectral Shaping, along with powerful dynamic EQ, compression, and limiting. You simply adjust the settings to your own taste, and it sounds incredible. And don't get me started on Master Rebalance, which literally lets you reach into the mix and manipulate the vocals, bass, and drums at the mastering stage. My bandmates are pretty demanding of my mixes, but now when I send off the masters for approval, I get comments back like, "Holy shit, pristine, damn good mastering, crystal clear, dude, you're a wizard. Finally, I love my singing, and the drums and bass sound huge." Check out the newest Ozone, RX, and all the other great plugins at iZotope.com and use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off. Yeah, so that kind of brings us home as far as, our audience too, because most of us don't have a chance to go be on a big scoring stage. And so what are some things you feel like you want to say to those of us who are like, yeah, I'm recording music in my home studio, recording band stuff, but I've got this opportunity to kind of create a bit of a, cool string section or an arrangement, or orchestral version of the song, or maybe it's just, a cool addition to the song. What are some thoughts about where we can start as far as doing that stuff? And, what are some basic things that help it sound a little less robotic and more realistic?
Right. Well, the first cool thing is, and I think everyone would agree, but they forget that we have this thing that didn't exist 15 to 20 years ago, or maybe 15 years ago, but not 20 years ago, called YouTube. And you can literally go on there and type in how to make your mock-ups sound better. And there's every, college student or professional or whoever in the world is giving a tutorial on tips and tricks to make the mock-ups sound better. I think right now the challenge is to get, and I'm sure there's a world where a whole podcast on just AI music is either happened or going to happen.
Sure.
Oh yeah, see, but the idea of being musical and human and having something artistic to say as being the driving force behind the need to create anything and or put it out into the world for someone to hear like that. I would say, getting back to that is right now, I think one of the most important things that any of us can do is getting back to figuring out what we actually have to say to put out in the world before we worry about how we're going to do it. Because if someone was to take a lot of this stuff away from me, like, first of all, like all these keyboards, like, before I got one or two extra, like I used to keep them in the cases. So I wasn't even looking at them if I'm writing orchestral music, because it's a big distraction. I could sit there going through patches and tweaking all day. And if my goal is writing orchestral music for the most part, like I'm getting further and further away from that goal. Like distraction, some of us, this whole, living in 2023 itself is a giant distraction from anything that you might be doing.
But not this podcast, Rockstars, because right now,
not this podcast. You want to, you're cleaning up the studio. You're thinking about why, getting inspiration. I actually started listening to another podcast yesterday. I discovered where I was like, podcasts, I should start listening to these more.
There you go.
Even in the car, I feel like, we commute a lot in the car. I just as a side note, I like to listen to a lot of music that I've heard over and over again all the time in the car. I don't listen to the radio. But I feel like I've been a monkey wrench has been thrown into it with the interest of podcasts all of a sudden. So yes, listen to this podcast.
So speaking of which, when you're talking about AI stuff here, I've got a question for you. I asked ChatGPT, what question should I ask Jermaine? And here's one for you right here. So this is what AI wants to know about what you do. And so do we. What role does experimentation play in your composition process? Are there any particular techniques or approaches you find helpful for exploring new musical ideas in the studio? Which is kind of what you're talking about. You're talking about how those experimentation can be a distraction against an orchestral composition. But how about when it really becomes your best friend?
Well, I think experimentation is important. I think partially why when I think of, I reference John Williams a lot because he's my fave. He's the guy. He's the dude. You got John Williams, then you got everybody else. When he writes his melodies, like it's, to my knowledge, it's not like he sits down and writes it from beginning to end. There's a process of refinement. And so part of that, that's kind of experimentation. What about this way? What if I go up a fourth? What if I go down a fourth? How about up a fifth? What if I repeat this? So, playing it back for himself in his head or playing it at the piano. That's all experimentation. So I think even when it comes to musical sound design, like recording a tuba, manipulating it, pitch shifting it low, playing it in octaves, creating patches off that stuff, granular synthesis, whatever you want to say, all that stuff. It's a tool that could come into play later when you're looking for yet another idea of things to throw at the wall and see what will stick.
Yeah.
And typically, this to the point of that question, if I start a problem like I did that movie Oracle that hasn't come out yet, you mentioned for Universal, for the first 3 months, 2.5, 3 months of working on that, I wasn't writing cues. I was just coming up with sounds that were different and working on the programming and sound design of the music itself before I actually started, because I wanted to create a template that was unique to this project only. So I recorded a lot of sounds, recorded some inside the piano sounds, recorded actually myself doing saxophone multiphonics and things, and then sent all that to a synth programmer who then kind of warped the sounds and made funny, odd sounds. I'll be interested, to follow up with you when I hear that the movie's coming out, because the goal was to have it be like impossible that the same composer did this that it did Coming to America, and have them sound so different and so weird. And so we're bringing someone else to collaborate on my recordings, and then actually use that as, okay, we're going to start the score with this material. And it will be a hybrid score where you hear things like strings and orchestral elements, but every single cue is laced, to Chris's point, with this experimental sound. So, it's a horror film, and you can get away with more of that stuff.
Yeah.
When
in other words, it's in that genre of film, it's more welcome to create sounds that make people feel like uncentered.
Yeah.
Like
Uneasy
uneasy. A little off
balance. The tuning is crazy. It's okay. I can play flute on it. It's fine.
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
So that's cool stuff. I mean, it makes me, these are the kind of things that make me excited about making records in the studio too, where I'm like, why don't we start records that way? And we kind of do. I think when we do records with the band, sometimes just who's playing on this is the first step towards like, okay, here's the canvas that we're going to be creating on.
Right.
And what instruments do we bring, or what studio are we in? But there's that added element that you're talking about of going in and saying like, maybe we're in the same studio we're usually in. So how do we find like a whole new palette of colors to start working with?
Yeah.
Which is
or
cool.
even throw everything out all together and just improvising for a few days. And I know that for a fact, I don't know if you've heard the story of the score of American Beauty is something I can point to, as Thomas Newman's the composer that a lot of that music that we know as some of that became the sound of all temp music for a long time, because every cue in that movie just worked as temp for anything. It doesn't matter what it is, it just worked. And it's great music, very beautiful, very musical, but they did a lot of sessions where they're just improvising and creating a vibe, based off of some descriptions. I know another scorer, Christoph Beck, told me that he got to a point where he didn't want to write anything with a keyboard sitting, with a MIDI keyboard. So they did a whole session. I think it's called American Made. It's a Doug Liman movie where they had these recording sessions and I think they recorded it to a click, but they had all these rock / jazzy hybrid sessions where they did some recordings, but then they took all those elements and chopped them all up and used them as kind of like a toolkit. You know what I mean? Whether it was the drum loop or a guitar riff, everything just became these pieces of things to start the process of being so out of the box as opposed to just the typical, almost one person improvising at a keyboard. Like you want to get feedback from people. And I actually did it maybe a year and a half ago, where I hired, because I like vocalists, I like vocals, I like, I've said I'm a big fan of gospel. I hired a couple of singers to come in and just record some melodic themes for a few things that I thought might be along the lines of what a script that I was pitching to read. And nothing came of that. But I'm telling you, like, we had a conversation before we even started about the process of being like, okay, we're all here. That's great. But, what makes you tick? What makes me tick? How can we actually have a moment where we capture what it is to be inspired? That's more important than even landing the project that this could be for, because I think what we came away with was something that was very honest,
Yeah.
And I think it shows in the recording. It's not out there for everyone to hear, but it's not for everyone also,
Yeah. Well,
it's for a moment of honesty,
It's fascinating to hear you also talk about this idea of temp music, because if I'm understanding this correctly, I just realized that in the world of filmmaking, you actually have an opportunity where potentially you can steal from everywhere and everything for a little while, because it's just this private sketch for a while, and then you just like, what a cool concept that you could sample things and use them as placeholders, and then write something original to replace it later. And that's sort of like an idea for making music in the studio too. It's like, I wonder what ways we could borrow along the way, and then just sort of like replace it later too. It's
that's
cool,
the interesting thing, coming to America, I feel like it could be its own podcast. The way I even got that job opportunity was, we were kind of kicking around ideas about the fact that they were going to start shooting that movie. And I'm happy I was even talking to them about the fact that it was coming up and open to suggesting some ideas. But basically they told me that the movie was going to kind of open similar to the first movie, and graphically speaking and sound wise, but can we do something that builds off that? So before they even shot the movie, I did 2 or 3 different mock-ups of something based on a description. And then that ended up becoming the temp music. And when I say becoming the temp music, like, we're literally on set and they're playing that cue while they're going through different rooms and filming doors opening and throwing rose petals on the ground. And because they shot it that way with my music playing on set, it goes directly into the edit, and from that point, it is the temp music. It's original temp music in a way. So exactly what you're saying, like it becomes like there's an idea, and when we use the idea, we base something off the idea, but then it becomes something new, and then we build basically the whole score around this thing that ends up thankfully being my temp. And, like I said, for the most part, there wasn't a ton of temp music in the film that wasn't something from something I'd done. So
that reminds me of something. I think it was an interview I heard on a podcast a long time ago with Mark Mothersbaugh from Devo, another composer. And he was suggesting one of his tips for independent composers was take the music you're creating and find out who the editors of the films are and send it to them. Because they always put that in as temporary music at first. And sometimes it's such a good fit that you know,
Yes.
that's the one that's got to stay.
Absolutely. I mean, another one, the movie, 2 movies after that, the movie Senior Year, I talked about, they asked me for a reel. And after I got the gig, the entire movie was temped with another movie that I did. So it was actually my score, because it was a light comedy, but a movie that took place around high school and romantic, fun, light elements. And every cue, it was all temp music from it. And I sat with the editor and I thought it was so great because, I could literally change however much I wanted, and it was already in the right direction because the director loved the temp and I wasn't like arguing, how dare you use this person? It's like, it was me, thankfully.
Wow. Maybe you've already answered this, but here's another one. Can you share any strategies or methods that you use to overcome creative blocks or challenges during the composition or songwriting process? Like when you, do you ever have just sort of like blank page fear, And
yeah,
like,
I mean, you just definitely need to start coming up with ideas. I mean, I have on my phone a lot of things that I've sung when I was having a random moment of inspiration, just to make sure, I want to get back to the days as much as I can of primitive and not so calculated. I want things to sound like they actually came from deep within, like somewhere that seems inevitable as opposed to forced out, So when I can, I try to do things that, like, for instance, like when I started the gospel thing, coming up with things away from picture that are all in the same universe, so that when I get down the road, I have other stuff to draw from, almost like a roadmap and a backup roadmap. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's one thing to be, okay, now we're in the thick of it. There's a certain moment where okay, this thing is working. Let's use that over and over again. But if nothing's working, you want to not be there with a blank slate, just grabbing onto anything you can at the last minute. Like, you want to actually have some things to draw from.
Do you ever feel like the time that you've spent watching YouTube videos, trying out mix tricks, and tweaking version after version of your mixes has gotten you nowhere? Have you been looking for a simple, straightforward, step-by-step process for creating a pro mix that won't take you years to learn? What if you could have a Grammy-winning mix engineer who understood all your mixing struggles and could coach you through them? If you struggle with any of these questions, then the Ultimate Mixing Masterclass is just for you. Now you can discover the proven step-by-step mix system from Grammy-winning mixer Craig Alvin for consistently creating a pro-quality mix from your home studio that will sound amazing everywhere. Listen to this quote from one of our students, David. Quote, "Absolutely the most informative and helpful block of information and mentoring on the mix process that I've ever been a part of. That was like sitting behind a mix engineer for years, watching and picking up tips along the way, but condensed into a 6 to 7 hour session." Close quote. Look, I'm so confident that this will take your mixes to the next level that if you can't get a killer mix within 30 days, I'll give you a full refund, no questions asked. So if you're ready to take your mixes to Grammy-winning quality, then go to ultimatemixingmasterclass.com and start now by checking out the free preview of the ultimate snare mixing trick. And I'll see you at the front row table of the Grammys. Cheers. Is it typical to have picture as you begin composing? I mean, you talked about, was it proximity where it was just sketches, just drawings?
Well, that was before he shot the movie. And actually, he wasn't sending me picture while he was shooting, because everything, he kept everything pretty much to himself until it was like what we consider a rough assembly, where it's like maybe a version that's way too long, but the story is actually there. But nowadays, whenever I can, if I'm hired, I asked if I can be, if access could be granted to what's called the dailies, which is just, honestly, it's just scenes shot in it. Sometimes it's the same scene over and over and over and over and over. It gives me an idea of what the film's tone and the colors are going to look like. For me, that informs a ton of what I'm going to do in terms of my sound. Like if it looks a certain way, sometimes they shoot things to look very, very, very colorful or devoid, of color,
And
and
it
that,
just
that
gives you
tells me
a sense
something
of
about,
mood.
yeah, exactly.
And what
So
about
that,
tempo? I mean, like, what are the things that sort of inform tempo for you?
I mean, typically you want to see something at least somewhat cut together, roughly before you can think about tempo. Um, you know, I think when things are, in the early on stages, they're not super exact, but they can give you a generic sense of tempo once they're cut together at a rough level. But typically the dialogue scenes, if it's just a shot of going back and forth between two people, the tempo is not going to be um, too up. But if someone's walking or someone's driving or something, the story is saying we're now going from here to there. You want to have somewhat of a pacing to it or a pulse.
Is
Obviously,
there
a
a, is
chase
there
scene is going to.
is there a typical correlation between what you think their heart rate is in the scene to the tempo of a song or the track?
Maybe.
I just made that up.
I might need to start thinking about that, actually. So, yes, I want to say maybe there is.
Yeah, I mean, certainly in horror genres, that's like
Hmm.
you're getting anxiety needs to be translated.
You definitely hear the heartbeat samples,
Yeah,
heartbeat loops, and some of the
right.
thrillers.
So, and then with relation to that, does a track like Surveillance, for example, in Proximity? I don't know if
Mm.
that's throwing you on the spot to remember each song by title, but does something like that get put against a grid and a click in the DAW
Mhm.
when composing? And I imagine your timeline is your conductor track is like tempos are changing a lot and stuff like that. Or do
Not
you
it didn't in
compose
that
more
one.
fluidly, like just in a free form fashion?
Um, I think I try to be a little more fluid with it. And is Surveillance the one that has like the where it's kind of a. I do remember a scene towards the beginning of the movie where there's these up close shots of a guy like almost like an old radio announcer
Yeah.
scene of a movie where he's talking about picking up radio waves and this and that. And in the movie, it is cutting back and forth to, well, you said don't give it away, but it's cutting back and
Yeah.
forth to, let's just say, something that's becoming more and more anticipatory. Let's say that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in that sense, I did want to have a little bit of escalation in what we did. So you start an idea and then escalate, building on an idea. And you can
Yeah.
honestly, with that, in terms of film scoring as a technique, you can pick anything and just escalate it, and it describes that there's escalation,
Yeah.
and adds tension.
Do you find yourself also a fan of EDM music and the kind of dance music that gets created and some of the methods that get used for that for building up tension and release and things like that?
I think maybe in some of the situations where there's a pulse that's needing, that's more, well, there's kind of a sense of youth involved.
Yeah.
I remember one a demo that I did for um, an animated thing where there's a lot of fast car driving, and it was just this fun thing. I definitely had an EDM spin on my submission process to that.
Do you know who the composer was for the film Gravity?
Oh,
Do you remember
Stephen
that one?
Price.
Stephen
Stephen
Price.
Price. I remember, so he comes from a music editor background. And I remember seeing that film and hearing about, oh, yeah, this composer, he used to be a music editor, but he did a good job on it. There's, the scene where I think it's Sandra Bullock is spinning out of control or
Yeah,
whatever.
that's
For
what I
me, I
remember
was like,
that.
okay, this is the scene that won the Oscar pretty much for score because there's so much going on and it's one of those rare moments when in film scoring where you go, the marriage of music and sound and picture and how it all worked together was so seamless and so perfect. It seems like it could only come where the music editing of the film and or composition and director were all so on the same page that you just get something special, you know.
Yeah. What are your thoughts about that, what you just described, and that happening on what I assume was a large studio picture versus an indie film, as you were also mentioning? Is that like the pinnacle to try and arrive at, is where you're?
It seems like it. It seems like it would be. I mean, not everyone. I know a couple people that have come from. Stephen Price is a good example of someone that came from a background in having success as a music editor. Maybe that was his focus. Maybe he did it as a means to doing something else. I don't know, because to my knowledge, since then he's only been a composer. But his background in music editing, for me, when I saw that movie, I remember thinking, there's something so strong about the marriage of music and picture that it's unique. But like I said, first of all, your director has to really, really care about and embrace and encourage the composer to be this thing that is making bold choices. Like that movie's score is bold. It's not hiding. It's not tiptoeing, you know?
Right.
And when you get that, you get a thing that's like the score starts to become a character. It's helping tell the story. It's not just there, you know? Yeah. And I think the director, he pushed the composer to become a character in the storytelling process. Yeah. I think Coming to America for me was one of those moments where our director was saying, I mean, when he would make comments like "have fun with it," like you can only imagine what that means to your own personal level of creativity. Like he's trusting you, you know, he or she is trusting you at that point to not only be you, but to do the thing that you're hired to do, which is be creative and actually have fun. Here's a thought: having fun with music. Wow, what a concept. When he would say things like that, I was shocked, because I'm thinking, you know, here's a movie where you would think he wants to have all this control and he has all this pressure on him to deliver on a movie that has all these expectations. Like it's intellectual property, you know, it's the first movie is a classic. Like it's holy ground. And he's saying, go have fun. You know what I mean? I'm like, okay, wow, that's liberating.
What were some of the things we should know about the composition for the original? Because I don't know anything about that.
Coming to America?
Yeah, the first one.
The first movie it's funny. I didn't get the chance to speak to him, but I saw Nile Rodgers at a hotel last week. He's the composer of the first movie, and he was known for, you know, more guitar playing and band production and being the band's chic and just being himself, you know.
Yeah.
Nile Rodgers, he's a music icon basically, but what he brought to it was very much a sense of authenticity in terms of African culture, you know, to the first movie, that it became a staple. When I think of the first movie, I always thought of legit music that describes the geographic needs of the movie. Like when they're in Africa, you know, Zamunda is a fictional place, and the movie doesn't take, like most of the movie doesn't exist there. Like they go to America, and then we're in America referencing where they come from a lot of the time. So, and there wasn't a lot of score. In our Coming to America, there's 60 minutes of score. There's a lot more score in it. And most of the movie takes place in Zamunda, this fictional place in Africa that is, you know, supposedly West African, specifically. So, like, I did look into some of the elements of what languages do they speak in West Africa, and what kinds of instruments are used. So it's to not be way off, you know, super Hollywood version of, you know, westernized version of it. But
what were some? Were there any particular instruments that you discovered that you remember really? I
remember there's a scene in the movie where they're at what's called a coronation. I don't know if, you know, people have seen it on this podcast or haven't, but there's a coronation that takes place in the sequel. And it's in the script that you're going to have basically instruments on stage at this party during the coronation. So actually, in the script, they didn't say what instruments, so we started talking about what we could actually find that is specific to West Africa, whether it's Zumunda or whatever. And the kora was one instrument.
That's got the strings and the
it's got the strings, and we actually found a kora player that I think he lived in Atlanta. That was in the Musicians Union because it was all union. And I actually talked about having. At first, I suggested wooden flutes or gold flutes or something that looked like there was royalty involved.
Right.
And I was like, I don't know if they have a gold flute, if the cameras would show up that it looked like it was made out of gold. So let's try.
And by
wooden.
the way, can I keep it
after
after the movie's done? Can I?
Just exactly. Actually, they brought. I think there was a prop master that brought something that it looked more. It just looked better on camera. And also, African harp. I think we might have had. Just a couple cool instruments.
Is the kora the one that has the single string, and then you just kind of bend it a little bit?
I feel like either there's one or two. I can't remember how many strings are on it, but the guy came in, he made a meal out of it.
What about the giant log drum that you hear about that would be like in the center of the village?
Oh, well, we didn't have that in that scene, but I did have some of that stuff end up being in the score. We actually had our percussionist, Sidney Hobson, because by the time we actually started scoring the movie, I got picture in January after we shot in the previous fall, picture in January, then COVID shut everything down in March. So that's around when I was starting to actually write cues for the first time. With the idea that the movie was going to be in theaters that Christmas. And as you know, COVID threw everything for a loop. Mm-hmm. And I had originally planned to hire 3 percussionists and go to somewhere like Fox and do a 6-hour session where we just have a heyday of percussion. And one thing, budgetarily, I think I was overshooting some things, but then also too, logistically, it became impossible to do that how I want it and when we want it. And with the flexibility that, some of the dance sequences I needed to mock up early because they needed to be sent to the choreographer to dance. There's another element we haven't really talked about. Yeah, we actually had a lot of the percussion pieces. There's a funeral in the movie that at a certain point, the script had a 2-minute dance sequence that we had shot. We actually shot 2 or 3 minutes worth of stuff over the course of almost a week. Massive dance sequences that were choreographed to my MIDI mock-ups, and where I was literally the director. Again, is another example where he said, Fatima Robinson was our choreographer. She was like, or he said that you guys just have fun with it. So we did this thing. We just went back, the 2 of us with Dropbox, and she would send me back the dances with the click and the music that I played, and some live percussionists in her dance studio, playing along with what I'd done, kind of showing how it was coming together. And so basically that's where, when we got to set, it became an integral part of making those things happen, because we would change things to actually even better fit her dance sequences on set at the Pro Tools rig. So again, that was another fun thing of how, even though it got cut down to probably 30 seconds.
That's what I was going to ask. So, for example, in the
you're
podcast,
like, where is it? Where's that scene? You're like, I didn't see that. I say, well, a lot of it got cut.
No, that's not what I meant. What I meant was, for example, on the podcast, I'll put music under my beds where I'm, doing an ad for a sponsor or something like that, and the length is always changing. So I quickly learned you sort of become adept at cutting out bars, adding bars, just making music different lengths. But at the same time, you're always like, how do I do this and have it not drop a bar or a half bar? And do you find yourself as a composer, when there's rhythmic and dance stuff like that, the music probably guides the editing to a certain extent, but then they still come back at you with the need to conform
A little bit,
shortening.
And another example of that was, I don't know if you remember, there's a Bo staff sparring scene where Eddie Murphy's character is sparring with what turns out to be his daughters, an homage to the first movie we sparring with Arsenio.
Yeah.
And there in the script, it says that there's basically a percussion section at the sparring session playing and escalating their music as they're escalating in the drama of the sparring scene. And so that's another situation where, again, there's some music that I composed, these drum percussion tracks that were played on set as the percussionist mimed to my recording and or played along to it while they were sparring on set, and being advised on how best to make it look more like they're being more intense, but also musical, per the composition.
Wow. So
and that was the first day I was on set. Was that recording that scene, and actually being told as I'm slowly setting down my backpack to come over here in the middle of the whole shoot and this unknown person to tell the percussionist what I wanted them to do in front of like 200 crew. I'm like,
wow.
Trying to be background. We're not like used to that stuff. We're here in you see the studio has no windows. And here I am like told to go tell them what to do. Very much.
I get it. I mean, like
culture shock.
The introvert of the studio that's in us. We like, I think what draws us into the studio is we like to just sit and listen. Well,
and also control, like it's just us, a lot of the times, it's not other people that I'm like, I don't even know who the power players you haven't even met all the producers, that have their, what's called the village setup, watching every camera, every angle. Who's this guy telling them to hold their sticks higher? That's not our movie. I didn't want to make waves or whatever,
Yeah. Wow. No doubt.
But it worked out.
I mean, as an engineer, you learn about stuff like that. The challenges between getting the audio you want and not getting in the way of the video, getting what they want, the film crews.
Exactly.
This podcast is proud to present Recording Studio Rockstars Academy. Are you ready to take your recording, mixing, and mastering to the next level and make your best record ever? Then visit the Academy to find the course that's right for you. Want to record killer drums in your home studio? Then check out Rockstars of Drums to learn how to record, edit, and mix pro-sounding drums with a professional Nashville session drummer in a Grammy-winning studio. Or if you're ready to start mastering your own records at home, then check out Rockstars of Mastering, where I walk you through exactly how I master my own records using nothing but plugins. Plus, I take you into a world-class mastering studio, Sterling Sound, to meet with Ryan Smith and hear how he professionally mastered my record, Skadoosh, for release to streaming platforms. That's the music you hear on this podcast, Rockstars. And if mixing is your focus, then check out my free mixing course, Mix Master Bundle, where I show you how to mix using stock and free plugins in Pro Tools. Plus, you get a look at how I recorded everything in my studio and multi-track downloads for you to practice mixing and even upload to your website if you want. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to recordingstudiorockstars.com/academy to get started now. So we're coming up on the end here, but what do you want to say about just the recording process of like Proximity coming to America, just in terms of like, even if you say, I didn't do it, somebody else did it. What about the way that those things get mic'd up for recording, the brass ensemble in Proximity or the percussion in Coming to America or any of those things?
Anything about Coming to America was, like I said, when we got into writing actual cues, we were, the pandemic just begun to rage out of control to a point where we didn't know if we were going to have a film industry anymore when we came out of this. So the script at a certain point had called for specific amounts of vocalists. I think it said that a 10-person choir is singing in this scene and a 20-person choir is singing in this scene. Well, our choir became 5 vocalists who all had recording gear in their bedrooms. Otherwise, they couldn't be on it.
Wow.
And I remember we had a Zoom call with our engineer and recording mixer, Dennis Sands, the iconic Dennis Sands. Was my dream to finally work with him, and him asking all of our vocalists, what kinds of microphones they had, how they were going to be recording, what do they normally do, not to belittle anyone, but just to find out how can we support the process, and then fulfill the vision, and then get the sound that would work best if we're going to record every single singer separately, and if we need to layer them, and what the scenes actually called for, things like that. And everyone had kind of a wide range of mics, but it was a learning moment for all of us. It became more intimate and almost kind of fun, because it's like we have this crazy pandemic where in a lot of cases, folks didn't have any work. And here we are on a project that lasted for months. Yeah. And, for some of them, it's only a couple hours of work or whatever. But for me, as a thing where I'm literally slowly piecemealing this thing together. Yeah. And to my benefit, because the studio's over here scrambling because they're trying to save their studio. They're not like breathing down my back. Every time I send them a cue, they're just happy that the movie's moving forward. Yeah,
and a steep learning curve for a lot of people too. I think a lot of people, it's the first time they're trying to figure out how to record themselves.
Yeah, a lot of them weren't folks that recorded all the time at home. A couple of our vocalists were. Our woodwinds had to record at home as well. I was told one of them was on an island somewhere, I think in Hawaii. She had a rig flown to her because she's a session flautist here in LA. But we had people all over recording on this thing, kind of one instrument at a time. Like I said, for those who didn't have it set up, they were getting it set up. Some were being taught. Some people had an assistant coming in and helping show them how to use gear. Yeah. It wasn't me doing that, thankfully. But everything from Logic, Pro Tools, Cubase, Digital Performer, whatever, you name it, everyone was using something different. GarageBand, just get the recording to us somehow. And all these things were flown into Dennis's session, and he had someone helping sort out, making sure everything was lined up. And once it was kind of magical how it all came together, because, like I said, slowly but surely we had each element replaced,
Yeah, that's wild. I remember it's like, at the beginning it was sort of exciting to try and figure stuff out. And now we're all just like, just give me a live band.
Just get back to everybody. Yeah. Yeah. It's way easier.
Speaking of that, I do appreciate you joining us on yet another Zoom call. So thank you, Jermaine. It's been awesome hanging out with you on this podcast and hearing all the stuff you do. And I know you talk about it. It's every day for you. For us, it's just fascinating to get a peek behind the curtain, the magic curtain of how this stuff happens. So very cool. I got one last question for you. This one is our hypothetical question that I love to ask our guests on the show. We're going to take the Wayback Studio machine. You get to go back and find young Jermaine. I don't know what point you're at, whether you're playing saxophone and thinking, geez, I really like movies. Movies are pretty cool. And that music must come from somewhere. But you go back and find yourself and you say, listen, I've come back to give you this one bit of advice. Here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the recording studio yourself one day. What advice would you go back and give yourself if you could?
I don't know. As you were asking the question, I was like, I still don't know what I would say. Like, what would I say? Because I feel like, in theory, I would still do a lot of the same things that I did. Like, I feel like, in theory, like when I think about even playing saxophone, which to me, in a lot of cases, as I discovered film music, it felt like I just wasted a lot of my life. Like, it was a big distraction. But when I think about saxophone, I think also about a lot of experiences that I've had that have complemented it. Like, even we took playing in saxophone quartet very seriously in my undergrad years, as if we were playing in a string quartet, and developing a very deep intimacy with playing in an ensemble and being exposed and being vulnerable and playing jazz and improvising. is also an experience with playing saxophone, going to jazz camps. There are teachers that I met that I didn't know their role in the history of jazz that actually turned out to be quite important. Being able to get in front of people and solo in a concert setting early on, let alone solo and ensemble contests, as me and a pianist in kind of a classical repertoire setting. These are all things that came from playing saxophone that I didn't, that I don't think I would attribute to that. And then also not thinking so much about what the goal was. I think now, honestly, right now, when I do anything or when I listen to anything, I'm thinking about how can I apply this, or what is this trying to say, or what is the history of this? I think I would like to get back to, and I don't know if this is ever going to answer the question, but get back to a point where I'm not thinking so much about the music. Number one, it needs to be something I hope that the musician can enjoy, or the composer can enjoy, and not think so much about. But
it's like you
advice.
You flipped the question around. I like it. It's the way forward.
Oh, really?
Machine. Yeah.
It is the way forward. I guess the answer would be to tell that person to not think so much about music, but or to remember to not think so much. Because I think there was a certain point when I realized that I wanted to be a professional musician where I felt like I overanalyzed everything and all the things, I realized in college I had been holding the saxophone the wrong way. I'd been breathing the wrong way. My embouchure was wrong. And so I overthought everything moving forward to make sure I was doing those things. But I think you probably heard it. Maybe you've heard the said that you need to learn everything and then forget it all.
Yeah.
Something like that, I think to be reminded to forget is something that I think that I would tell my younger self.
I think
to be eager to. Oh, was it?
I think so. Yeah, I think it was.
Okay.
I think he's something along the lines of it took him years to learn how to paint like a master painter. It took him a lifetime to learn how to paint like a child.
Okay, so I need to go and read that, because that's what I'm literally thinking now about. The inner child right now is the one that the people that I know that are successful right now, they're living out their adult in an appropriate way, but an ability to be a child and be childlike, And I definitely think I've gotten away from that, for sure.
That's great, man. I love hearing.
This is a therapy session right now.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the reasons why we do these long podcasts. Is I think we go so long and we get a little bit wiped out that we finally start just, really improvising too and thinking off the tops of our heads. So thank you so much for doing this interview with us, Jermaine. Really awesome to get to meet you and hang out.
Yeah.
Really appreciate the introduction to Chris James. Let the rock stars know, where can they go find out more about you? Where would you like them to just go check out their stuff? What if they're making the next greatest indie film and they need a composer and they need to contact you?
If they need a composer, I can thankfully direct them to my agents. Thankfully, before I'd be like, my email address is ... write me today. But yeah, I definitely like to share a lot of the creative stuff, bits of it and pieces on Instagram. It's the more streamlined version of the creative ins and outs of what's going on, as well as my Facebook page. My website is a super pared down version of all that. But YouTube actually has a lot of videos that, like, I'm a very big fan of documenting the process of doing all this stuff. So every project I do, I always try to have some documented video, audio
Testing 1, 2.
to the process of creating that stuff. So Instagram and YouTube are definitely going to be places where you're going to find something about every one of the last few movies that I've worked on.
Yeah, that's great. I'm looking at your YouTube page right now. I just accidentally played a little clip of it, but I don't think it went out on the intranets. Yeah, cool stuff. And it's really great to see your Instagram and see these shots from the scoring stages. That's not something we see every day in our home studios, you know. And then, of course, there's always some really cool looking microphones just hovering over everybody's heads.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Groovy. Well, Jermaine, thank you so much. I really look forward to meeting you in person again. And I don't know if next time I go visit Chris, he'll be mixing one of your scores in Atmos, but I'm sure that's going to be right there.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Actually, Chris did work a little bit on senior year, so
oh, cool! Right on.
You should check out what I call on the soundtrack album. The main title, I think it's called Senior Year.
Okay.
His fingerprint is all over that mix.
Right on. Well, Rockstars, thank you for joining us. Jermaine, thanks for hanging with us, man. Look forward to seeing you in person.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Man. Cheers. Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our awesome sponsors who help make this episode possible. Lewitt, Atom Audio, Native Instruments, Isotope, Spectra 1964, and OWC. And remember, at isotope.com and nativeinstruments.com, use the coupon code ROCK10 for 10% off any plugin purchase. If you enjoyed Recording Studio Rockstars, please check out our sponsors using the links in our show notes, because it's a great way to help support this show. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio. They're going to help you make your best record ever. I would also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars: Vlad Wesselchenko, Braden Stremming, Liz